All right, well, thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along to this on a Friday afternoon. Hopefully I can keep you all awake and keep myself awake as well. So, yeah, my name's Stephen. It's quite confusingly spelt with a PH and not a V. Blame my parents. This is my first time here at NewCrafts. I've had an absolutely excellent time, so I hope you have all too. And if you want to contact me after this for any particular reason and you don't hate Elon Musk, then I'm still on X just about. I'm also on Blue Sky, but I forgot to put it up there, or on LinkedIn as well. Now, I work for a company called Bloom and Wild, who you may not have heard of, but you may have heard of our French brand called Bergamot. We are a online flower delivery company, and I'm the VP engineering at Bloom and Wild. But I'm not here to talk to you about Bloom and Wild, just to make this very, very, very clear. But what I am here to talk to you about is a short period in my life. So, history of conferences seems to be littered with these sorts of stories of perfection, I've found. So, I don't know, teams that deliver on time, challenges that get overcome, products that you find are perfect. And I've often wondered why that is. I mean, is it because it's easier to stand up on a stage like this and tell a good story with a happy ending? Quite probably. Is it sometimes because some of us stand up on these stages and one of the reasons we're here is because we want you to hear about our team and our technology brand, and maybe a bit later we want you to come and join us as an engineer? Also quite probably. Wait for the last slide. But I thought I'd redress the balance. So I'm here to tell you about a high-performing team, a short period of my life, but I'm here to tell you about why sometimes high-performing teams don't last forever. So sometimes high-performing teams make mistakes just like any other team, and sometimes those mistakes threaten the life of the team or of the product they work on. So this is a story. So let me tell you about a team I ran where we thought we were going to change the world. So this is a story about luxury fashion. You might not think it now. It took a few years afterwards for it to kind of grow out of me. But it's a story of celebrities and launch parties and influencers. But above all, it's a story about what makes teams high-performing and what can derail them. Now, when I was putting this together, I thought, okay, I'm not going to tell a happy story. So should I name the team? Should I name the company? You always hear people standing on stages like this and they say, my client did this or my client did that. And then I thought, nah, so what? So this is a story about a product called the Net Set. Anyone heard of the Net Set? I'm not surprised. You'll hear why in this story. The Net Set was built in a company called Net-a-Porter, which is a luxury fashion e-commerce company. Now, just to be really, 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 really clear here, everything you hear today is my experiences, not my past employers' experiences. But I think it's important to anchor it. So let me introduce you to the Net Set. So this is take yourself back to 2015, late 2015. You couldn't buy things on Instagram. You couldn't, I think, buy things on Facebook. You certainly couldn't buy luxury fashion through social commerce. And so we span up a team within Net-a-Porter, and we built a social commerce application. We built ourselves a social network. And so it did all the things you would expect a social network to do. Looks a bit Instagram-y, doesn't it? It had a feed, it had groups, you could follow people, you could comment on things, you could love things. But critically, even back in 2015, it had some really cool image matching technology, which meant you could snap a picture of, I don't know, this fantastic shirt I'm wearing, and you could upload it to the Net Set, and in the background, we would match that against Net-a-Porter's product catalog, and we'd say, oh, we sell shirts like this. Do you want to buy them? And then you'd be able to purchase that garment through the app. So it was a full end-to-end social commerce application. Pretty cool. We'd never done this before. Now, we were set up as a brand new team. So we were brought together, experts in a brand new team, totally greenfield. brand new code base, brand new start. We were even put in a brand new office and told to treat the rest of the organization like a black box. So use their APIs, but effectively don't tightly couple yourself to them. So we were sat in this different office with the world at our fingertips. Now, frankly, it's the best team I've ever worked in my entire life to date. It was fantastic. But what's the best team you've ever worked in? So I'm not going to ask you for the answer to this, but just spend maybe 20 seconds or so, the first team that comes into your head, think about the best team you've ever worked in. All the thinking faces. Brilliant. So let me tell you what was great about being part of the NetSet. So we were sponsored by the founder and CEO of the company. So it was very easy to get things done. There was effectively a blank check. Any blocker we had mysteriously disappeared out of the way. We had a very, very clear deadline and focus, so we had to launch the NetSet on our founder's 50th birthday, which is the toughest deadline I've ever worked to. It doesn't move. Our founder wasn't like, I don't know, a member of the royal family in England where they have two different birthdays, a ceremonial one and a real one. But that meant we could really, really focus. We had a really clear deadline. We had no dependencies. We had no debt. We were a completely greenfield project. And out of that, we could build a really great, safe team spirit as we came together. We were trying to build something we all really believed in. And that meant we could build a culture of safety, of sharing, of support, and self-organizing. I was the manager of this team, but it was the most easy self-organizing team I've ever worked with. And this was us, really. We were one small entrepreneurial team against the world. Sat in our own offices, writing our product that the founder loved, working how we wanted, involving the whole team in every decision. The classic autonomy, mastery, purpose, as Dan Pink has said. And it was great fun. It was really hard work, but it was so much fun. And well, we met our deadline. Life was great. Here's me being slightly meta, using Facebook to announce the launch of a completely different competing social network. Someone even bought us a cake with our faces on it. It's a very nice cake, actually. And we had a big launch party. There were fashion models you may have heard of. There were Premier League footballers came to this launch party. It was fantastic. And the press loved us. This is what they said when we launched. Has Net-a-Porter found the holy grail of 21st century fashion? Had we? We were going to be the next, at that stage, Facebook, the Facebook of fashion. So it was all good, right? Product was great. The team was awesome. We launched on time. Happy days. Done, right? I can leave? Thank you. Okay. You're probably all wondering now why we're not all NetSet users and none of you have heard of the NetSet. So here's what happened. So a little time afterwards, there was a merger and the company founder left. And at this stage, we realized that our sponsor cared about us and our product, but nobody else did. So autonomy was great, but total detachment was not great. We were really so focused on getting to our launch and getting our product out there that we were just smashing people out of the way to do so. Somebody once told me it felt like a bit of a cult of the NetSet to the other engineers in the organization. People felt like we were competing against them. Once we'd launched, and maybe about 6 months afterwards, maintaining that entrepreneurial spirit within the team was more of a challenge. We weren't as focused on our deadline. We had to be focused on the next thing, but the next thing wasn't quite as exciting as building and launching the product. And so 6 months afterwards, people began to get a little bit bored. Or we found that the sort of engineer that really got us to our deadline, we couldn't give them the sort of work that really interested them. And so we stumbled on for a couple of years, and the the team got merged into another team. A few people left, including myself. And eventually, the whole thing got axed. Less than 2 years afterwards. This is what you get if you Google the net set these days. Now, the interesting thing here is not that it's some random tennis shop. What's the dog's meow? I want to go there just for that. Okay, so how did all this happen, and how could a team so high-performing and happy change? Well, I often ask myself, what could we do differently? So it's absolutely natural in situations like this to say, okay, what went wrong? What could I have done to have stopped this? If only we'd done this, then it would be okay. How could we have kept that interest alive? Well, I think the first really, really important thing to not forget is teams become high-performing because they do good stuff. And so sometimes if you can keep doing that good stuff, then you're in a good place. So in times of failure, resist the urge just to look at the negative and over-focus deeply into the negative. Focus on the good stuff. The good stuff we did in that team are things that I've built into a playbook that I'm going to talk about now that I've used in future roles. It's been really, really valuable. So don't forget, in times of failure, about what you do that's good. So why was the NetSet a high-performing team? So firstly, there was room for people to grow. We set clear expectations on career growth and had clear frameworks. We managed those expectations. We involved everybody in decision-making. And we recognized that a team is greater than the sum of its parts. So we recognized the importance, for example, of glue-type work. It wasn't easy to join the NetSet. We had quite a high hiring bar, but a fair hiring bar. And we were a diverse team. Now, it's perhaps easier to build a more particularly gender diverse team in companies in some industries than others. It certainly was at the time. We had diversity of gender, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of thought, and I really believe that helped us build a great product and a great culture. And we measured the health of the team regularly, and we used that in order to course correct. So we listened, we adapted. And so that brings me on to some things you can do that help build happy, high-performing teams with happy people in them. So firstly, set clear expectations. Make your hiring and your joining process great. If you can, make your own technology choices. Share your learning. There are 6 of these. Measure your health. And make sure you check in regularly. So let's dive into these in a little bit more detail. So the first one, setting clear expectations. The one thing that I found really valuable if you want to set clear expectations is to make sure your team has a charter. Now, a charter is a set of principles, almost like the rules of the game for the team. And it's really important to co-create these. So a manager should not come along and say, these are the rules of being in this team. The team should say, what are the rules we live by? So whenever anybody joined the NetSet, and when we started the NetSet, we did a chartering exercise. Now, people are often, if you ask them, tell me about all the good things we should do as a team, it's sometimes a bit hard. If you say to people, tell me what the worst team does, for some reason as humans, we find that a little bit easier. So using a reversal type technique, so for example, saying, how does the worst team show up? Well, the worst team never shows up on time, do they? Oh, right, okay. If the worst team doesn't do that, what does the best team do? The best team shows up on time. We could put that in a charter. Keep it short, keep it snappy. This is an example from a different team that I've run. And make it visible. So back when we all used to work in offices, we used to have this framed and up on the wall. Put it somewhere, maybe if you're on your Confluence site, on your wiki, so that people understand how the team operates. Now, if you want to know a bit more about charters, I've written about it a while back, so have a look. All right, secondly, and this is a fact, so people leave high-performing teams. So I left the high-performing team that was the NetSet. So it's really important to focus on hiring and focus on the joining process. Focus on how quickly you can get the right people and you can get those people productive. And do that in a way that avoids bias. So there are some simple things you can do to avoid bias when you're hiring. You can make sure that you are advertising your roles in as diverse a group of places as possible, i.e. not just on LinkedIn. You can make sure that your job descriptions are not gender biased. They don't, for example, include excessive amounts of bullet points. You can consider that if you use a take-home test, making it optional. You get the best out of some people, and people prefer a take-home test. Some people, you get the best out of them in a whiteboarding exercise. Offer the options, because what you're trying to do is get the best out of the person in the recruitment process. Use your team, and definitely raise your brand first. So particularly if you're a little company, and we've seen this in Bloom and Wild, particularly a few years ago, we were a very small company selling flowers. Nobody had heard of us. So we needed to go out and raise our technology brand so that people wanted to join us and they understood what we were about. They understood the technologies we use. They understood why selling flowers is fun and nice. And so realize you're selling your team. You need to shout about this sort of stuff. I don't think people shout about it enough. And then when people join, make their joining experience as good and as easy and as simple as possible. And this often means access to the right people and access to the right information. So for example, when people join our teams, they get a Trello board. That Trello board contains lots of useful information that they can come back to at their own leisure, they're in their own time, in order to understand how the company works, how the team works, how the code base works. Makes it easy. Now, as much as possible, make your own technology choices. There is a direct link between teams that give engineers a lot of leeway to own the technical decisions and that team's ability to hire and maintain and engage particularly senior talent. Now, one way you can do this, rather than being a dictator, is this concept of a golden path. Now, you may have heard of this concept of a golden path. A golden path is a supported direction by the organization, which it's easier to stay on than it's easier to step off. But the organization does not say you cannot step off the golden path. What the organization says is if you step off the golden path, then you need to support yourself. So as a team, you could choose a different technology, but you're supporting it. It's not, for example, centrally supported. And what this allows, and used sparingly, is agency for your engineers, while also ensuring that you have a relative control over the technology choices that you make. Now, I talked about sharing learning and why learning is important, particularly when you join. Now, learning is important whether you're in a team, whether you've just joined the team, or whether you're not. Learning and development is your competitive edge. And some of the things we've done that we think help with the learning and development. So making time for it. For example, we'd have something called Tech and Share, which was reserved time where we could watch conference videos, people within the team could present, people could just get together and discuss. We've run book clubs in that time, for example. We run something called Learning Days, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And then make sure that there are the forums to encourage teaching. So having people within the team learn something and then teach somebody else in the team, whether it's through this Tech and Share, whether it's through, if you have communities of practice, for example, or whether you can encourage people eventually to go to meetups or conferences and stand up in places like this and teach. It's a really, really valuable experience, because as much as possible, as you become more senior, it is about what you can learn, but it's about how you can act as a force multiplier and act as somebody who's able to teach and upskill other members of the team. Now, I talked a little bit about learning days. So what is a learning day? So a learning day is something we tried that we found worked quite well, which was a bookable day that you could book off and use for learning. Switch yourself off and then make it your day for doing any training that you wanted. Away from, I guess, the expectations of project delivery, away from the expectations of the manager, and with absolutely no obligation, if you don't want to do anything with what you learn. Because if you give people this sort of space, they go and learn what's interesting. And what's interesting is normally what benefits you and your team. Now, learning days came out of a health check. So we ran we regularly ran health checks in the NetSet. I still regularly run them in Bloom and Wild. And we got some feedback that said, you're not dedicating enough time to learning and development. So seeking feedback is really, really important, and health checks can be one way. Now, what I've found has been useful with health checks, we've used the same approach which comes out of work by Henrik Nieberg in Spotify. And this method of health check uses a number of different questions presented on cards, and there are two opposing statements on those cards. So, for example, it's not our problem versus we're committed as a team and feel responsible for getting things over the line. And what you do, the team has a red card, a green card, and a yellow card, and you read out the question, and then if people agree with the, I guess, positive statement, they hold up the green card. If they agree with the negative statement, they hold up the red card, and if they can't make their minds up, they're somewhere in the middle, they hold up the yellow one. And you collect all this together, and then you use that in order to facilitate a coaching-based discussion around how could we improve. So it's a really good tool to raise self-awareness of the team's health and an indicator of where to focus effort. It's definitely not anything nasty like a maturity model or some sort of tool where you say, oh, well, squad A has all greens and squad B has all reds, so squad B must be bad and squad A must be good. It's only to be used within a team and within a safe space. And so an example of a question here. We're a totally super gelled team with awesome collaboration. Or we're a bunch of individuals that doesn't know or care what the team are doing. Now, this one was interesting in a health check because it's neither green nor red. It's just kind of right in the middle. Those are often ones that it's worth thinking about because maybe people do care about it, maybe they don't. So an output of this for us would be, okay, what does the team mean? So as an aside, I'm a strong believer in Lego Serious Play. If you haven't looked it up, it's a whole different conference talk. But suffice to say, this is the team's representation of a perfect team. I don't know. But it's a really, really useful output or a useful facilitating guide to use to delve deeper into the reasons behind health check results. So measuring health as a team, really, really important. Measuring health as individuals, also equally important. And to do so, it's really important to check in regularly. So a question for you. So which of you who has a regular performance review, maybe once per year, twice per year? Some people don't. Keep your hands up, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Who enjoys the experience and finds it massively motivating? Oh, still a few. but not as many as were saying they have reviews. Now, I have a theory on this, right? So here's a typical review timeline. So let's say this is a 6-monthly. This is actually the Net-a-Porter timeline. So you'd set some objectives, and then time would pass. You get on with your life, and then you'd have a review, and there'd be this big bit in the middle where nothing really happens from the individual or the manager. And objectives and goals get forgotten. And you do this thing once every 6 months, which means it's really disruptive because it's a classic example of batching things together. And so you're sat there as an engineer, and you've got 12 bits of 360 feedback to write for 12 other people, as well as your own review and your normal work to do. And as a manager, you're sitting there going, oh God, I've got like 10 reports, and I've all got to write all their reviews, and I've got to chase everyone for all the feedback, and da-da-da. It's a nightmare. And it leads to a lot of anxiety because you don't do it very often. And it has a high impact. So the impact of getting it wrong is really high. And this means it becomes really demotivating. And it kind of becomes a tick box exercise. And then it kind of, I would argue, defeats its purpose except for deciding who gets a pay rise and who doesn't. And some companies do some horrible, horrible things afterwards, like something called stack ranking, which is fortunately falling out of fashion now, where as a manager, you get asked to put people on here, and you have to have a certain amount under the curve in different places. And in some places, it used to mean that the people under the curve, but in the wilting flower bit over the back there, actually lost their jobs, which is horrible. So fortunately, that doesn't happen anymore. But even within a 6-monthly period, it's not fast enough. It's too batched. So we decided to make a change. A completely under the radar, not approved by HR in Net-a-Porter at all change, but driven by this. So feedback is always better when it's timely. That's how you can course correct. But then also, as a manager, frankly, one-to-ones are always better when people prepare for them, including yourself. So what did we do? We took lots of inspiration from lots of places, including Atlassian, and we started to introduce monthly, what we call check-in sessions. They had a theme, and there'd be a monthly 30, 45-minute session. And they'd be backed up by shorter-term goals, so people's goals, instead of being set for 6 months or 12 months, were set for 3 months or 6 weeks. And through this process, we encouraged people to tell us how the period had gone from their perspective before the session. So how did you like the last month? And the manager would give feedback in that session as well. What it really was timely, bite-sized chunks of performance feedback every month, a little chunk, every month, a little themed chunk on a different theme. And we operated this under the radar. And so, for example, we had questions a bit like this. So here's a question. So what a theme called removing barriers. So a question to answer would be, what barriers have you encountered to your work over the past few months? And every engineer in the team would be asked the same question, so we could collate the answers together. Maybe there was a barrier that pipeline speed was too slow, or perhaps we should invest more in that for the greater good. Maybe what have you loved over the past 6 months? Where do you want to head towards in your career? And we would always ask people, what's your feedback on the last month? And we would always provide feedback to them on the last month. And so it would look a bit like this. You'd have a different theme, which would repeat through the year once per month. Now, those sort of orangey brown coloured lines there, that's where the existing performance process was. But when we got to that, we had already had 6 months worth of discussions. So it was just a matter of pulling that all together, not going, oh, it's the performance review season, and then all the anxiety that can bring. So really helped engagement. as does keeping it fun. So this is an example of a Christmas retro where that's me in a not my real beard. So keeping some fun in the process is really important. So my playbook for happy people in happy teams: set clear expectations, make your hiring and joining process great, make your own technology choices, share your learning, measure your health, check in regularly, and keep it fun. Fun is good. So don't forget about the good times, especially in times that feel like failure. But meanwhile, back to our story. Boo. So, if you remember from the beginning of this talk, so we were sponsored by the company's founder. We had an open checkbook. We had a very hard deadline. We had no dependency or no debt, a great team spirit, and we built a small team against the world mentality. But the founder left. We found after 6 months it wasn't quite as much fun when the deadline had passed. We'd really siloed ourselves because teams were jealous of us. And it didn't feel like so much our own entrepreneurial activity. So things got axed. So I often think about change, and I think the really important thing in this change was recognizing that there will be change. Now, you may have seen this before. This is very popular. This is the change curve. I think with hindsight, using this and talking through this and making it clear to the engineers that there will be change, and there will be change through the process, irrespective of whether the company or the product still exists or not, is really important. And I think also making it clear that this is not linear. You can go backwards on the change curve as much as you can go forwards on it. There's always this expectation that you go from denial to anger, shock, then you bargain a bit, you get depressed, then you accept it and you commit and everyone moves on. Whereas the reality is that's not what life's like. So it's perfectly usual to go to kind of acceptance and then something else will happen and you'll go back to depression or bargaining again. And recognizing and being clear to a team that as a product ages, a team changes. So the sorts of engineers, for example, that really thrive on bringing a product to market are not necessarily the sort of engineers that want to be working on that product in 2, 3, 4 years' time. And I think we made the mistake in the NetSet of assuming that we could maintain that spirit and we could maintain that entrepreneurial way of working, and we couldn't. And all of this, as people left along the way, meant the team was changing. And I really like this quote from Heidi. She's written a great book called Dynamic Reteaming, by the way, which I'd really, really recommend. So if somebody joins or if somebody leaves, your team fundamentally changes. And so everything you do when somebody joins or leaves, like chartering, like team building, you should do again when somebody joins, because the team has fundamentally changed. And if the leader of the team has changed, you should do that. Now, team building activities play a really big part in obviously building a strong team, as does cake. Cake is important. I often think we wouldn't be where we are in software development without cake. But cake does have a bit of a dark side. Just as an aside, right, you can make food look absolutely delicious in color and absolutely horrible if you take the color out. It's like, cake, cake, whoops. But trouble we had in the NetSet is our cake looked nice. People wanted a slice of our cake. We would not let people have a slice of our cake. We'd built a one team against the world sort of mentality, arrogant, hidden away in our own office. And what we were lacking was this. And we hadn't built and we hadn't maintained this. So I've thought a lot about trust since the NetSet stopped. And firstly, should have watched out for the signs. So signs like frustration and indifference, for example, are really important. We often used to get feedback, well, wasn't invented here, was it? Or, well, of course you can do it like that. And we'd say, yeah, we can, thanks. Whereas the right answer there would have been, well, how can I get that person involved? They're obviously interested. Let me get them involved in what we're doing. And the really important thing when it comes to trust is this. So it's all about sharing. You build trust by sharing. Without visibility, without sharing, there is no trust. Now, trust can be made up of many different things, though, and I found this is quite a useful way of looking at trust. So this is from a book called The Trusted Advisor, and this is called the trust equation. And it goes something like this. So credibility, i.e., how well do you know what you're talking about? Plus reliability, so how often do you do what you say? Plus intimacy, so how much do you show you care about the other person? All over your apparent self-interest, so how much are you interested in yourself? So, for example, let's say you want somebody to build you a house. So how credible are they? Do they have references? How reliable are they? Do they turn up on time and start building your house? How much intimacy do they show? Do they show they care about the fact they're building your home? And how much are they apparently self-interested? You don't maybe overhear them on the phone bragging to one of their friends about how much money they're making to build you a house. So let's apply this to the NetSet as a team. So our trust, very high. With our project sponsor, the founder, we talked a good game. Reliability, we delivered exactly on time. Intimacy, very high. We cared about ourselves and our product. And to us, our self-interest was low. We worked well as a high-performing team. So within the team, very high trust. Yay, good for us. Okay, let's apply that to the out of the team. Credibility, I'd say, was medium. So people knew we had some good engineers. Reliability, to everybody else, low. We didn't deliver anything to them. If anything, we seemed to deliver something that might compete with their products. Intimacy, low. We cared about ourselves. Apparent self-interest, massively high. Trust, low. Problem. Now, what could we have done about this? Now, we could, for example, have opened up our API and allowed people to build on top of it. We could have run shared hack days to open up our code base. We could have opened up our team. We could have done blog articles. We could have done internal posts. We could have done presentations. We could have shared. We didn't. We could have helped others to discover and engage with us, perhaps through shared testing sessions or dog fooding, A/B testing internally. We didn't. We could have done more about aligning. And we could have done more, therefore, to engender trust rather than build jealousy. So if you do anything and you've got a high-performing team, focus on this. Make sure you're building credibility. Make sure you're building reliability and intimacy. Make sure you're reducing the apparent self-interest. This increases the trust. Now, you might find yourself in a situation where you're trying to do all these things and maybe they don't work. Well, firstly, don't give up, because having a high-performing team is a really hard thing to do and a really important thing to do and a lovely period of life. Focus the team inwards if you have to. And if you have to, as the manager of that team, ensure that there's alignment yourself. Act as a communication layer, some sort of middleware in your organization. Make sure people have a network, though, somewhere, even if that network happens to be externally. And having an external network, I think, is incredibly important. And if all else fails, you can always leave and go and do something else, because you'll learn a lot in a high-performing team, and that's incredibly important to take elsewhere. So, I was part of a happy, high-performing team. It didn't last forever. We made mistakes. Those mistakes threatened the life of the product and the life of the team. We were going to change the world. We never quite did. But if I could do it again, I would keep doing all the good stuff. I would recognize change better. And I'd watch out for the signs. I'd pattern match these signs a lot further in advance. I'd make sure I was focusing the team outwards as well as inwards. opening up the technology and the teams and making sure that there was alignment, building trust. And even if that didn't work, I'd keep doing all of that anyway. So what did I do? I moved elsewhere. I moved to a company called Bloom Wild that ship beautiful, lovely flowers. If you're ever interested in working for a company that ships beautiful and lovely flowers, we are hiring at the moment. If not, here are some books that I would really recommend if you're interested in anything I've talked about. Thank you so much for your time today. And I think we have a little bit of time for questions, if anyone has any. One down the front. If anyone's got a microphone, otherwise I'll show. Oh, there's one over here, look. I'm not even sure whether that's turned on, but have a go. Otherwise, I will repeat your question when you say it to me. It is.
Okay, so some things were pretty clear to me about the jealousy and so on, but one thing that seemed very strange is why the new office? Who pushed for that? Was it the founder?
I think it was. I think the idea was, so at the time, it was very, very popular for companies to build a cool-looking office and kind of it used to be in London. It used to be called establishing your digital presence, but you build a cool office somewhere else, and that would and then you'd use that office, particularly when people joined, because they think your whole company was like that, and it wasn't. I think there was also the other reason to do it was just to separate and just geographically segregate the team from all the other teams. Now, if I'm honest, I don't actually know the thought process behind why that was done, but it was at the time great from a building a team spirit perspective and high engagement, because we had a room, we could do what we liked in it. That was our space. But yeah, I recognise obviously with hindsight that wasn't actually the best thing to be doing.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Any more questions? Don't want to fall off the stage there.
Thank you. You've shown some health check card.
Yes.
Do you have some either URL or just can you repeat the name of the person who designed the card?
Yeah. So they were used in, or the basic set of cards were used in Spotify. So if you search for Spotify health check, you'll get the cards. I mean, what we did is we took the cards and then we adapted them. We changed some of the questions and so on. But yeah, if you want the basic way of doing it, I'm pretty sure the blog post is still available. So yeah, if you search for Spotify health check.
Okay, thank you.
That's much easier.
Yeah, thank you very much. So you talked about don't focus on negative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Don't too much focus. Do you have heuristics to do that? Because I'm naturally very negative. So I'm seeking for some advice.
Yeah, so am I. I'm a natural pessimist. What I've found useful is to, at the end of every week, write down everything that's gone well and write down the things that have gone well. So what I have is I have a document called What I've Learned This Week. And at the end of every week, a little half an hour blocked out of my calendar to write down what for me and what for my team I think has gone well that week and what I've learnt. So rather than saying what's gone badly this week, and it's great because it forms like a record basically. And then when you go back to it, it's worded positively. It's worded about learning and good things, and so it doesn't. You don't anchor on that classic. I'm only anchoring on the bad things, which I think is actually human nature. You anchor on the bad things because there's an adaptation or a survival mechanism. Remembering the bad things meant you could avoid the bad things. So I think making sure you write down regularly the things that have gone well and the things that you've learned can really, really help.
Okay, so yes, stacking only negative things could be very hurtful. So you have to stack positive things as well, like to compensate.
Yeah. Effectively, write down what went well and write down what you learnt.
Yeah.
rather than write down what went badly.
Sure. Okay. Great. Thank you.
There's a lady over there. If we can.
Were you aware how your progress was measured in the company at the time?
So the question was, were we aware how our progress in the company was measured at the time? So the answer is yes to the project sponsor. So when the project sponsor, so when the founder left, then it was very clear that measurement had been very direct, and it hadn't been shared, and nobody else was aware how we were being measured. And I think that was the core of the problem.
So you were like private division
Yeah.
of your founder and without any contact of
Yeah. Yeah. Super secret hidden away team.
NCIS.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, gentleman at the back.
Far away. Is about the hiring that you mentioned. Was it a lot of rotation? Because good hiring is a lot of work, right? This is not easy. You need to dedicate a lot of time. How was it?
Yeah, fortunately, it was not a lot of rotation. So there was a bit of growth. So the team started off with 4 and we ended up with 8. So we doubled the size of the team, and it is quite a lot of effort. But that's where I think having somebody like, so I was the engineering manager. I think having somebody like an engineering manager in that team, even if that team is pretty self-organizing and day to day can run itself, is really, really valuable, because it meant I could do a lot of the heavy lifting on the recruitment process, and it would only then be a matter of getting the engineer, keeping the visibility of the process to the engineers and getting the engineers involved when they needed to be, or equally when they wanted to be. Oh, one down on the front, and then I think we're probably out of time. This will be the last one, but I'm around for maybe the next 45 minutes anyway. So if you've got questions, that's.
You mentioned you were the owner of the quality. Yeah. How did you approach the ownership of the quality as a team?
So how do we approach it? So we had 2 people whose job title was tester, but the important thing is the quality was the team's responsibility. So the 2 testers in the team, one of them was more focused on exploratory testing and working with the product folks, and also working with a internal kind of a customer group. And then the other one was very much focused on helping the engineers and working with the engineers on automation frameworks. But the really key part that made it work and makes it work, and I think it's really, really important, is the team own the quality, and the testers are there to help.
Testers were quality responsible, or
testers were not
quality ambassadors, or
quality ambassadors is quite I think that the testers were responsible for making sure that the team understood the importance of quality and what they needed to do. But yeah, the team was responsible for quality. So if we pushed something into production and it didn't work, the team solved the problem. We didn't say, why didn't the tester catch that problem?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, folks.